Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you all for coming. My name is Godwin. I'm a PhD student from Northumbria University, and I'm doing this presentation with Dr. Seraphim Alvanides, who is also my academic supervisor. And the title, as you might have seen in the book, is Cycling in the City, Understanding Urban Cycling Behaviors and Constraints in Time, Space, or Space. The structure of my presentation is basically I'll give some definitions and backgrounds and why I'm focusing on cycling, and then take you through my primary data collection, the collection itself, the field work, the processing, and then give you a little bit of sample characteristics, and then show you some findings or results about comparative analysis and visualization of cycleway corridor, a notion that I'm trying to use to apply in this analysis. And actually, any critique on this would be very much appreciated, and give you some concluding remarks. So somewhere in the presentation, Dr. Alvanides will come. Youth cycling is defined as any cycling not done primarily for fitness, recreation such as cycling touring, or sports such as cycling racing, but simply as a means of transport. And in this case, I'm focusing on adults. And I'm actually taking definition of adult from UK Department of Health Physical Activity Guidelines. So it's actually 19+. And the idea of active transport is also any form of travel where human muscle is put there reasonably active during the process. And cycling trip is also defined as any journey by an adult cyclist bounded by stops and identifiable in both the travel diary that I gave to the participants, and then that is by purpose because I told them to record the purpose for beginning, and GPS data by geometry, that is if I'm able to identify that in the GPS data that I collected from the participants. And so this idea of corridor space or region is also basically a buffer zone around cycle lanes or paths, or say just how you might cycle infrastructure. And I'm using this idea to detect cycle trips or cycle trip sections, and also available cycle infrastructure. And this study area is actually in the northeastern part of England, precisely Newcastle. And the dots you see here are just homework school location of some of the participants. So why focusing on cycling? Well, the literature I've read so far suggests that the demand for sustainable ways of living, and mainly due to some problems associated with traffic congestion, population, climate change, etc. And in it, there is a strand suggesting that cycling as active transport is one of the solutions to these sustainable ways of living. And so researchers or literature is suggesting that calls for cycling research should focus on understanding cycling through investigating and discovery of cyclists' perception and actual route choice experiences and preferences. And also, given the advancement in technology, also to focus on integrated research methods. Newcastle City Council has also, it's not surprising because based on this demand, there seems to be somehow pressure from campaign groups on City Council or other authorities to promote lower carbon methods of travel. And Newcastle City Council is doing that. However, there is dissatisfaction from local campaign groups about lack of coherent cycling strategy, negative attitudes towards cyclists, slow rate of cycling infrastructure provision, even the refusal of the local public transport providers to allow bicycles on the metro. Interestingly, I put there, this metro is now owned by, or in a way being managed by Deutsche Bahn, which is a German company. And I've been in Germany, and they allow bicycles on the metro, but interestingly, I don't know for whatever reason, it's not allowed in Newcastle. And also they're campaigning that cycling shouldn't necessarily be just for leisure, but also actually to be seen as this active transport as a means of travel. And there are motivations actually, especially in the Western context, and that some countries like the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark have also demonstrated that. So therefore, cities or countries with lower cycling uptake, in a way, are motivated by this. And the reason why I'm doing the data collection or collecting primary data is basically because when I tried finding this type of data, it appears second data is aggregated in a way that, looking at the census that I think Anna centered in the way about transport. And also Department of Transport data, which is also in a way detailed but doesn't cover the study area. And also to make available new scientific data on this, and by doing that, further research towards understanding cycling. And my field work, actually, I used about 5 stages here. So planning and preparation is basically just preparing the travel diaries. I did some kind of evaluation of 4 GPS devices and picked this one to start. I'll show you later. And also prepared websites using Seraphim Alvanides, and basically for some kind of field work campaign using online and both offline. Offline, I prepared also brochures and flyers, leaflets and stuff like that. And so for the invitation, I use both online and offline approach. So like I said, use Seraphim Alvanides, and but then use the link in the email I sent to about 350 potential, I call them participants. I basically used a bicycle user group mailing list from Northumbria University and Newcastle University and other people that I contact, because I'm a cyclist myself, so I go to a lot of cycling campaign activities and stuff like that. So based on that, then I screened them. First, I screened them in considering whether they are utility cyclists as I've defined or not. And also I screened them with respect to whether they actually have the potential of giving me traces of their movement within this study area. So use some kind of criteria. And then the recruitment, I invited those that qualified for recruitment. So it was basically face-to-face kind of thing. And then they were given GPS device and the travel diaries over a week. So the data is over a week. I'm currently at this stage after the data processing. But then the red arrow shows that I just want to show here that I think I did some kind of pilot study and actually tested these 5 stages before actually continuing this data collection. And the issue came up, I think, and I was again, I'll be coming to your presentation. Basically, the issue about representativeness and other kind of the size of the sample sizes are all issues that I contemplated. But basically, I used some of related published research or work that, in a way, I learned some kind of things from. For example, Department of Transport GPS Disability Study and used about or did cover about 66 adults in 1 week. That is October, November. That's exactly what I also did. But then, in a way, because I've never done that before, so you have to find a way to make sure it's feasible and applicable and considering the scope of the research itself. So eventually, I think what happened is 118 initially agreed, and then 81 participated. That is out of 111 utility cyclists. And for this presentation, I'm using 76 participants. So that's the GPS I used. And the participants were given something like this in the leaflet, and then we were introduced how they could switch it on and off and stuff like that, the meaning of all those leg indicators. And also they were advised to place it either in the top compartment of the bag or in the pocket or in the key ring. So what you see here is a typical example of one raw data from a participant, and depending on how you look at it, depending on scale, you could actually perhaps decide or look at it and judge that it's not that messy. Or if you zoom in, then you realize that it's somehow messy. So it depends on the scale and how you want to use it. In my case, I didn't want this. I wanted the details, so I had to find a way to clean the data. And there are so many ways. You could use algorithms and others. But we introduced the idea of visual inspection. So using space-time cube and using the travel diaries, because you have information about the purpose and all the others, to support in using your own kind of discretion to judge and clean the data. So basically, I use GeoTime, which has been introduced by Opus. And basically, you put the raw data into space-time and then use the diaries and then other secondary data like OpenStreet and others supported by ArcMap and then to edit it. So that's basically the concept. This is the raw data you cut, or based on that you judge, and then you get refined data for further analysis. So this idea basically means that this idea of usability of space-time cube then you can consider that there's a gap, and this gap is being filled by this kind of operation. Because basically, space scientists usually use this part and never consider the raw data as such. So eventually, this is the data that you get, or we got from this refined data, and Seraphim will continue.
Okay, thank you, Godwin. So this is, the color here is insignificant, it's just different participants from the 76 we collected data for. It's interesting. I wish that cyclists were as boring as you described them earlier, or you described the people earlier, home to work. It seems that once you have a bicycle, you feel like touring around Newcastle and doing things, etc., etc. So I'm going to show you some results here. First of all, we split our analysis by sex and by socioeconomic group, etc. We have all these variables to consider and test different hypotheses or ideas that pop up in the cycling literature. So we have 26 females, 50 males, kind of represents the cycling situation in Newcastle. Maybe females are a bit overrepresented here. And this is a kind of sample characteristics. How many trips these people do. Okay, this is in relation to the sample size. So we have 907 trips. There is an issue about what is a trip, and it ranges from 300 meters all the way to 13 kilometers for women, and up to 60 kilometers for men. 60 kilometers one way and then going back. So this is an outlier, obviously, all showing off because we were collecting the data. And kilometer per trip, the average there, 3.6, 5.6 longer for men, and kilometer per person over the week period that we traced, we tracked them. Again, it's more for men than for women. Okay, so household income. This is a little bit difficult to read because, of course, again, we have the sample size split there, so we need to standardize it by some sort of measure. I'm going to skip this because I have some interesting results around how we are analyzing the data. Someone mentioned earlier algorithms to assign the GPS tracks to the route network. It doesn't always work very nice automatically, so we have to kind of do it semi-manually and find alternative ways. We set the GPS device to 5-second tracking. In retrospect, we should have done it to 1-second tracking maybe, but we wanted minimum interference with the cyclists. We wanted them to carry the GPS device throughout the week and not have the memory overflowing, etc., and losing data. So the result of this, what do you see here? All the lines are the tracks from the GPS devices around Newcastle. The blue ones are within the cycling network. The green ones are very, very close, 10 meters away from the cycling network, and this is the buffer we created. The red ones are the interesting ones that we want to focus on. They are outside the cycling network. Some of them because there is no cycling network around, and some of them just parallel. So these people could be cycling here. One of them is me, actually. This is a bus lane, and I follow it to go to work every day because it's 1 minute 38 seconds faster. On the way back, especially in winter, I wouldn't dream of, it's an uphill with buses and cars running around, while you have a very nice bus lane here inside the park, and I don't mind going slower when I go back home, unless my wife has cooked me and is waiting for me, in which case it leads me to trouble. So, usually I do the cooking, by the way. I think when she's hungry, I have to do the cooking. So, okay, so this is all the trips we collect data for. The red lines are the ones outside we want to focus on. 35% of the kilometers cycled are outside this network. Now, what does this mean? We'll discuss it. The green ones are relatively, they're very close to the network, so they could be allocated to the cycling network. So this increases to about 64%. So two-thirds of the trips are within the cycling network, 1/3 is outside. This is track data, this is what people actually do. And then we split it by men and women, trying to understand differences in terms of gender. There aren't any. There are no significant differences there. Men and women behave roughly the same. Thank you. Okay, the space-time is not so important here. We split this data set from going to work, from home to work, and then everything else, including returning home. So, now here you see some interesting patterns. The differences are very small, but again you see more men, okay, cycling off network when they go to work. That's me. That's part of me doing this kind of thing there, compared to women, for example. But is this difference significant? It probably isn't, but it is a difference. Okay? The overall pattern doesn't change significantly. It's slightly more than 1/3 of the trips. Now, we can visualize this nicely, and what we want to focus on here is the time of the day. And of course, these trips take place during the morning up to around 11 o'clock. Okay? People going from home to work, and how they behave in terms of what sort of routes they follow. The long trips tend to be on the network, on the cycling network. Shorter trips sometimes are on or off, just 1/3 of the trips. All the other trips now, so men become more sensible, it seems, more sensible than women, and cycle back on the network, even if they have to cook meal for their wives or partners. So the difference here is not significant, okay? But the overall pattern is just below 1/3. So these people, we kind of tend to ignore the cycling network, or 1/3 of us. And the question is why? Okay, why? And again, visualizing the space-time. Right. One option is you travel from home to work, as I said, you try to follow the fastest route. Okay, home to work, so I don't bother with the blue or the green, I just go straight downhill, it's fast, and many people tend to adopt this behavior. Okay, one issue is time, another is, so it's something about me, or the infrastructure is not enough, or it's placed in a place that I ignore it, or I'm not aware of it. When I go back, or when we go back home, it's a different picture. We follow all sorts of different routes to go back home, and maybe combine it with various other activities. So, the conclusions. The research design is quite unique in that sense, and we know a few people have tracked cyclists with GPS devices. It's very, very complex, and we have a paper coming out, or we're submitting it, criticizing the DFT for moving away from this idea of tracking people with GPS devices, but in retrospect, it's quite hard work to clean the data. There's no significant differences between men and women when it comes to whether cycle on or off, you know, these things about safety, etc. In our sample, they tend to have similar behaviors. And there is reasonable use, 2/3 of these kilometers are cycled on the network, but there's 1/3 that people ignore the network. Either it's not good enough, it hasn't expanded enough, we're not aware, it's not functional enough. What is it about? Well, we need to support this with a bit more qualitative data and inform policy. And finally, space-time analysis can provide some insights in terms of how you use data and how you present it as well. Right, sorry I overran. That's great, thank you.